I need to tell you something about Cancer placements that most astrology content completely misses. And honestly, once you understand this, a lot of your internal experience is going to make so much more sense. If you're a Cancer sun, moon, or rising, you already know what I'm talking about. That thing where your mind won't shut off. Where a single comment from 3 days ago is still playing on repeat in your head. Where you're lying in bed at 2 in the morning, mentally rehearsing a conversation that might never happen. Where you analyze every text message, every facial expression, every slight change in someone's tone, looking for hidden meanings that may or may not exist. Most people call this overthinking. And sure, that's technically accurate, but that label doesn't explain why it happens or what's actually going on beneath the surface. Because here's what I've realized after years of studying this. Cancer's overthinking isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature. It's not a flaw you need to fix. It's the natural byproduct of how your emotional and cognitive architecture is built. And the reason traditional advice doesn't work for you. The reason people telling you to just stop thinking about it or let it go feels impossible is because they're treating a structural issue like it's a behavioral choice. They're asking you to turn off a fundamental part of how you process reality. That's like asking someone to stop breathing and just relax. So if you've ever felt broken because your mind works this way, if you've ever wondered why you can't just be chill like other people seem to be, I really want you to stay with me on this one. Because what I'm about to explain isn't just going to validate your experience. It's going to give you a completely different framework for understanding why your mind does what it does. And more importantly, how to work with it instead of against it. The thing nobody tells you about Cancer energy is that it's not just about emotions. It's about memory. And memory is where everything starts to make sense. Here's what most astrology content gets wrong. They talk about Cancer being emotional, sensitive, nurturing, all of that. And yes, those things are true, but they're symptoms, not causes. The root of Cancer's psychological structure is memory, specifically emotional memory. Cancer is ruled by the moon, and the moon governs the subconscious mind, the part of you that stores every emotional experience you've ever had. Not just the big traumatic moments. Everything. The way someone looked at you when you were 7, the feeling of being excluded in middle school, the exact tone your parent used when they were disappointed, the warmth of being held when you were scared. All of it gets archived. And here's where it gets interesting. Most people's emotional memories fade over time. The intensity dulls. The details blur. But for Cancer placements, emotional memories don't fade. They crystallize. They get stored with perfect clarity, complete with the emotional charge attached to them. You don't just remember what happened. You remember how it felt. And your nervous system can access that feeling instantly, as if it's happening right now. This is why a small comment from someone can send you spiraling. It's not that you're being dramatic or oversensitive. It's that the comment triggered an emotional memory. And suddenly you're not just dealing with what was said today. You're dealing with every similar experience your subconscious has filed under that emotional category. The rejection you felt at 12. The betrayal from a friend in college. The time someone you trusted let you down. All of it activates simultaneously. Your mind isn't overthinking the present moment. It's cross-referencing the present moment against your entire emotional database, trying to determine if this situation matches a previous pattern. And because your database is so detailed, so comprehensive, there's always something to compare it to, always another angle to analyze. Always more data to process. Does that resonate? Because I think this is the piece that changes everything. Once you understand that your overthinking is actually your mind trying to protect you by pattern matching against past experiences, it stops feeling like a personal failing. It starts feeling like what it actually is, a highly sophisticated, if sometimes exhausting, survival mechanism. Now let me explain why this mechanism is so active in Cancer placement specifically, and why it creates the particular flavor of overthinking you experience. The moon moves through the entire Zodiac every 28 days. It's the fastest moving celestial body in astrology. And what that means symbolically is that Cancer energy is designed to be responsive, adaptive, constantly adjusting to emotional shifts in the environment. You're built to pick up on subtle changes in mood, energy, and relational dynamics that other people completely miss. This is why you notice when someone's energy is off before they've said a word. Why you can feel tension in a room the moment you walk in. Why you know something's wrong with someone you love, even when they insist they're fine. Your emotional radar is operating at a frequency most people can't access. But here's the cost of that sensitivity. Because you're picking up so much emotional data all the time, your mind has to process an enormous amount of information. And processing that information requires analysis. You have to figure out what it means. Is this person upset with me? Are they pulling away? Did I do something wrong? Is this relationship changing? Your mind is constantly trying to make sense of the emotional signals you're receiving. And because you care deeply about your relationships, because emotional security is your core need, the stakes feel incredibly high. You're not just casually wondering if someone's mad at you. You're running a full diagnostic to determine if this relationship is safe, if you're valued, if you need to adjust your behavior to maintain connection. That's not overthinking. That's threat assessment. Your nervous system is trying to determine if you're emotionally secure, if you need to take action to protect yourself. The problem is your threat detection system is so sensitive that it picks up on things that aren't actually threats. A delayed text response, a slightly different tone, someone being distracted during a conversation. Your system flags these as potential dangers, and then your mind has to investigate. And because you have such a detailed emotional memory, you can always find evidence to support the concern. Remember that time someone pulled away and it turned out they were losing interest? Remember when you ignored your gut and got hurt? Your mind pulls up these files as proof that your current worry is justified. This is the loop. Emotional sensitivity picks up a signal. Memory provides historical context. Mind analyzes for patterns. Anxiety increases because the analysis reveals potential threat. More analysis happens to try to resolve the anxiety. But more analysis just generates more questions. And the loop continues. I've seen this play out in my own life. And I've watched it happen with every Cancer placement I know. You're not overthinking because you're neurotic. You're overthinking because you're trying to achieve emotional certainty in an inherently uncertain world. And your mind believes that if it just analyzes enough, if it just considers every angle, it can predict the outcome and protect you from pain. But here's what your mind doesn't understand. Emotional certainty doesn't come from analysis. It comes from trust. And trust isn't built through thinking. It's built through experience and nervous system regulation. But we'll get to that later. First, I want to talk about the second major factor that doctors Cancer's overthinking. And this one is even less discussed. It's about how you process identity. Most people think of identity as relatively stable. You know who you are, what you value, what you want. There might be some evolution over time, but the core sense of self stays consistent. But for Cancer placements, identity is fluid. It shifts based on relational context. This isn't the same as being fake or not knowing yourself. It's that your sense of self is deeply interconnected with your relationships. You become a slightly different version of yourself depending on who you're with. Not in a manipulative way. In an adaptive way. You attune to the people around you. You adjust your energy to create harmony. You become what's needed in the moment. This is a beautiful quality. It makes you an incredible friend, partner, and family member. You have this rare ability to meet people where they are emotionally. But it also creates a specific kind of psychological complexity. Because if your identity shifts based on relational context, then maintaining relationships becomes tied to maintaining your sense of self. When a relationship feels unstable, it's not just that you might lose the person. It's that you might lose the version of yourself that exists in that relationship. The you that they bring out. The role you play in their life. The identity you've built in that dynamic. This is why breakups, friendship endings, and family conflicts hit Cancer placements so devastatingly hard. You're not just grieving the loss of the person. You're grieving the loss of a version of yourself. And this is where the overthinking intensifies. Because if your identity is relational, then you need your relationships to be stable. And if you need your relationships to be stable, then you need to monitor them constantly. You need to make sure everything is okay. You need to catch problems early before they become unfixable. You need to understand exactly where you stand with people at all times. So your mind starts asking questions. Do they still value me? Am I still important to them? Did I say something that changed how they see me? Are they pulling away? Should I reach out or give them space? What if I'm being too much? What if I'm not being enough? These aren't random anxious thoughts. These are identity stabilization questions. Your mind is trying to confirm that the relational foundation your sense of self is built on is still solid. And because you can't actually know what someone else is thinking or feeling with absolute certainty, these questions don't have definitive answers. Which means your mind keeps asking them, keeps analyzing, keeps searching for evidence, keeps trying to achieve the impossible task of knowing for sure that everything is okay. This is exhausting. I know it's exhausting because I've lived it. And if you're a Cancer placement, you know it too. The mental energy it takes to constantly monitor your relationships, to analyze every interaction, to try to predict how people feel about you. It's draining. And the worst part is, most people don't understand why you do it. They tell you you're being paranoid. They tell you to just trust people. They tell you to stop caring so much. But you can't just stop caring. Caring is how you're wired. Your relationships aren't optional accessories to your life. They're the foundation of your psychological structure. And when that foundation feels shaky, your entire system goes into alert mode. So the overthinking isn't a personality flaw. It's a protective response to a very real vulnerability. You're trying to safeguard something that matters deeply to you. The problem is heartfelt. The method you're using, constant mental analysis, doesn't actually create the security you're seeking. In fact, it often does the opposite. Because here's what happens when you overthink your relationships. You start seeing problems that don't exist. You start interpreting neutral behaviors as negative. You start creating narratives based on incomplete information. And then you start acting on those narratives. You pull back to protect yourself from a rejection that hasn't happened. You seek reassurance in ways that push people away. You create the exact outcome you were trying to avoid. This is the cruel irony of Cancer's overthinking. The mechanism designed to protect your relationships often damages them. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because the tool you're using, hypervigilance and analysis, isn't the right tool for the job. So what's the alternative? If overthinking doesn't create security, what does? And more importantly, how do you work with a mind that's built this way without trying to fundamentally change who you are? This is where most advice fails Cancer placements. Because the standard recommendations, stop overthinking, be more logical, don't take things personally. They're asking you to operate against your natural wiring. It's like telling a fish to stop swimming and just walk on land instead. Technically possible with extreme effort. But why would you fight your fundamental nature when you could learn to navigate the water more skillfully? The real solution isn't to stop being emotionally intelligent or to shut down your sensitivity. The solution is to understand what your overthinking is actually trying to accomplish. And then give your nervous system what it actually needs instead of what it thinks it needs. Here's what I've learned. And this was a massive shift for me. Your overthinking is trying to create emotional safety through prediction and control. Your mind believes that if it can just figure out exactly what's going to happen, if it can just understand every variable, if it can just anticipate every possible outcome, then you'll be safe. Then you won't get hurt. Then you won't be blindsided by rejection or abandonment or loss. But emotional safety doesn't come from prediction. It comes from resilience. It comes from knowing that even if the worst thing happens, even if someone does leave, even if you do get hurt, you'll survive it. You'll process it. You'll heal. You'll be okay. Your mind doesn't trust that yet. Because your emotional memory is full of times when you weren't okay. Times when rejection felt like annihilation. Times when loss felt unbearable. Times when emotional pain was so intense you thought you might not survive it. And because those memories are stored with such clarity, your nervous system genuinely believes that if something similar happens again, you won't be able to handle it. So it tries to prevent it. It tries to control the uncontrollable. It tries to think its way to safety. And when that doesn't work, when the anxiety persists despite all the analysis, your mind just tries harder, more thinking, more analyzing, more attempting to achieve certainty. This is the trap. And the way out isn't through more thinking. The way out is through building actual emotional resilience, through proving to your nervous system, through lived experience, that you can handle uncertainty, that you can't tolerate not knowing, that you can sit with discomfort without needing to immediately resolve it. I know that sounds simple, but it's not easy, because it requires you to do the thing your entire system is designed to avoid. It requires you to stop analyzing and start feeling, to stop trying to figure everything out and start being present with what is, to stop seeking certainty and start building trust in your own capacity to handle whatever comes. And here's where it gets practical. Because I'm not just going to tell you to feel your feelings and leave it at that. I want to give you a framework for understanding what's actually happening in your nervous system when you overthink, and what you can do about it. When you start spiraling, when your mind latches onto something and won't let go. What's happening physiologically is that your nervous system has shifted into a state of hypervigilance. Your sympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for fight or flight, has activated, and when that system is online, your brain literally cannot access the parts of itself that regulate emotion and create perspective. This is why you can't think your way out of overthinking, because the part of your brain that would need to do that thinking, your prefrontal cortex, your rational mind, is offline. It's been overridden by your limbic system, the emotional brain, which is convinced there's a threat that needs to be addressed immediately. So your mind starts scanning for danger. It reviews past experiences. It imagines future scenarios. It analyzes every detail of the present situation. Not because you're choosing to do this, but because your nervous system is in threat detection mode and it's doing what it's designed to do, trying to identify and neutralize the threat. The problem is most of the time, there is no actual threat. There's just uncertainty. There's just the normal ambiguity of human relationships. There's just someone being busy or distracted or having their own internal experience that has nothing to do with you. But your nervous system can't tell the difference between actual danger and perceived danger. To your body, uncertainty feels like threat, and threat activates the overthinking loop. So the real question isn't how do I stop overthinking? The real question is how do I help my nervous system feel safe enough to come out of hypervigilance? And the answer to that question is completely different. You don't calm your nervous system through analysis. You calm it through regulation, through physical interventions that signal to your body that you're safe. Deep breathing, movement, cold water on your face, humming or singing, anything that activates your vagus nerve. The nerve that tells your body it's okay to relax. I know this sounds too simple. I know it sounds like I'm suggesting that the solution to your complex psychological patterns is just to take some deep breaths. But here's what I've learned, both from research and from lived experience. Your mind follows your body, not the other way around. When your body is in a state of activation, your mind will generate thoughts that match that state. Anxious thoughts, catastrophic thoughts, obsessive thoughts. You can't think your way out of those thoughts because they're not being generated by your rational mind. They're being generated by your nervous system's assessment of safety. But when you regulate your body first, when you bring your nervous system back into a state of calm, your thoughts naturally shift, not because you force them to, but because your brain is no longer receiving danger signals from your body. The hypervigilance turns off. the prefrontal cortex comes back online, and suddenly you can think clearly again. You can see perspective. You can access the part of yourself that knows everything is probably fine. This is why all the cognitive strategies, challenging your thoughts, reframing your beliefs, positive affirmations, strains, right? They don't work when you're in the middle of a spiral. Because you're trying to use your rational mind to override your nervous system. And your nervous system is stronger. It will win every time. But if you regulate your nervous system first, if you help your body feel safe, then the cognitive work becomes possible. Then you can actually examine your thoughts and see them for what they are. Then you can choose a different perspective. Then you can break the loop. I want to give you a specific example of how this plays out, because I think concrete examples make this more real. Let's say you text someone you care about and they don't respond for several hours. Your mind immediately starts generating questions. Are they mad at me? Did I say something wrong? Are they losing interest? Should I send another text? Should I wait? What if they're pulling away? If you try to answer these questions through analysis, you'll spiral, because there are no definitive answers. You can come up with a dozen possible explanations for why they haven't responded, and your mind will focus on the worst ones. Because that's what minds do when the nervous system is activated. They prepare for threat. But if instead of analyzing, you notice that your body is tense, that your breathing is shallow, that your stomach is tight, and you address that first, everything changes. You take some deep breaths. You go for a walk. You do something physical that helps your nervous system downregulate. And then, from that calmer state, you can think about the situation more clearly. From a regulated state, you can access the part of yourself that knows this person cares about you. That knows they're probably just busy. That knows a delayed text response doesn't mean the relationship is ending. You can choose to trust instead of catastrophize. Not because you forced yourself to think positively, but because your nervous system isn't screaming danger anymore. This is the skill cancer placements need to develop. Not the skill of not overthinking, but the skill of recognizing when your nervous system is activated and knowing how to bring it back to baseline. Because once you can do that, the overthinking naturally decreases. Not because you're suppressing it, but because the conditions that generate it are no longer present. Now I want to address something that I think is really important. And it's about the relationship between overthinking and intuition. Because here's something fascinating about cancer placements. You have incredibly accurate intuition. You can sense things about people and situations that others completely miss. You know when something is off. You know when someone is lying. You know when a relationship is shifting before any concrete evidence appears. But here's the problem. You can't always tell the difference between intuition and anxiety. Because they feel similar. They both show up as a knowing. A sense that something is wrong. A feeling in your body that demands attention. And because you've been hurt before. Because your emotional memory is so detailed. You've learned to treat every uncomfortable feeling as a warning sign. So when your intuition says something is off, you listen. But when your anxiety says something is off, you also listen. And you can't always tell which one is speaking. This is why you second guess yourself constantly. This is why you analyze everything to death. You're trying to figure out if what you're feeling is real intuition or just fear. And here's what I've learned about this. Intuition and anxiety have different qualities. Intuition is usually calm. It's a quiet knowing. It doesn't need to be loud because it's confident in what it knows. It shows up as a simple statement. This isn't right. This person isn't being honest. This situation isn't safe. And then it's done. It doesn't need to keep repeating itself. Anxiety, on the other hand, is loud. It's repetitive. It spirals. It generates multiple scenarios. It asks the same questions over and over. It needs constant reassurance. It can't settle. If you're lying in bed at 2 in the morning mentally rehearsing a conversation for the 15th time, that's not intuition. That's anxiety. But here's the tricky part. Sometimes anxiety is triggered by intuition. Sometimes your intuition picks up on something real, something subtle, and then your anxiety takes that information and runs wild with it. Your intuition says this person's energy feels different today, and then your anxiety says they're definitely pulling away. They're going to leave. You need to fix this immediately. You need to figure out exactly what you did wrong. The intuition was accurate. The person's energy was different. But the anxiety created a catastrophic narrative around that accurate observation. And then you can't tell which part is true. So you analyze. You review every interaction. You look for evidence. You try to determine if your feeling is justified or if you're just being paranoid. This is exhausting. And it's also unnecessary. Because you don't need to figure out if your intuition is right. You just need to acknowledge what you're feeling and then choose how to respond to it. Your intuition says something feels off. Okay. You can acknowledge that without immediately jumping to worst-case scenarios. You can sit with the discomfort of not knowing exactly what it means. You can't rush that if there's something you need to address. It will become clear in time. But Cancer placements struggle with this. Because sitting with uncertainty feels unbearable. Your nervous system interprets uncertainty as danger. So you try to resolve it immediately through analysis. You try to turn the ambiguous into the certain. You try to know for sure. And this is where the real work is. Learning to tolerate uncertainty. Learning to sit with the discomfort of not knowing. Learning to trust that you don't need to have everything figured out right now. Learning that you can feel something without immediately needing to understand it or fix it or resolve it. This is a practice. It's not something you master overnight, but every time you catch yourself spiraling, every time you notice your mind generating catastrophic scenarios, you have a choice. You can follow the spiral, or you can pause. You can regulate your nervous system. You can acknowledge what you're feeling without needing to immediately act on it. You can choose to trust instead of control. And over time, as you practice this, something shifts. Your nervous system starts to learn that uncertainty isn't actually dangerous. That not knowing doesn't mean something bad is happening. That you can handle ambiguity without needing to immediately resolve it. And when your nervous system learns this, the overthinking naturally decreases. Not because you're forcing it to stop, but because the conditions that generate it are changing. I want to talk about something that I think is the deepest layer of Cancer's overthinking, and it's something that almost never gets discussed. It's about the relationship between memory and identity, and how that creates a very specific kind of psychological trap. Here's what I mean. For most people, the past is something that happened. It's over. It might inform who they are, but it doesn't define their present moment. But for Cancer placements, the past isn't really past. It's alive. It's active. It's constantly being referenced and re-experienced through your emotional memory system. And because your sense of self is so deeply tied to your relationships and your emotional experiences, your identity is essentially a collection of memories. You are the sum of every interaction you've had, every bond you've formed, every moment of connection or rejection you've experienced. Your past isn't just something you remember, it's who you are. This creates a very specific vulnerability. Because if your identity is built from memories, then anything that threatens those memories threatens your sense of self. This is why you can't just let things go. This is why you replay conversations from years ago. This is why you hold on to relationships long after they've stopped serving you. Because letting go of the memory means letting go of a part of yourself. And your mind knows this. So it protects those memories. It keeps them alive through constant review and analysis. It makes sure you never forget. Because forgetting feels like losing yourself. This is why you can remember the exact words someone said to you 10 years ago. Why you can recall the precise feeling of a moment from childhood. Why you hold on to grudges and hurts long after everyone else has moved on. You're not being petty or unable to forgive. You're protecting your identity. But here's the problem with this. When your identity is built entirely from past experiences, you become trapped in those experiences. You can't fully be present because you're constantly referencing what happened before. You can't fully trust new people because you're comparing them to people who hurt you in the past. You can't take risks because your memory database is full of times when risks didn't work out. You're overthinking. At this deepest level, is your mind trying to protect you from creating new painful memories that would have to be integrated into your identity. It's trying to prevent future hurt by controlling present circumstances. And it does this by constantly scanning for similarities between now and then, by pattern matching every new situation against your historical database, by assuming that what happened before will happen again. This is why you struggle so much with new relationships, why you have such a hard time trusting people even when they've given you no reason not to trust them, why you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because your identity is built from memories of times when trust was broken, when people left, when love wasn't enough, and your mind is trying to protect you from adding more of those memories to your collection. But in doing so, it prevents you from creating new memories that could change your identity. Memories of trust that was honored, of love that lasted, of people who stayed. Your protective mechanism is actually keeping you stuck in an identity built from old pain. And this is where the real transformation has to happen. Not in your thinking patterns, not in your behavior, but in your relationship with your own past. You have to learn to hold your memories without letting them define your present. You have to learn to honor your history without being imprisoned by it. You have to learn that you can remember what happened without assuming it will happen again. This is deep work. This isn't something you fix with a few breathing exercises or positive affirmations. This requires you to fundamentally shift how you relate to your own experience. To see your memories as information rather than identity. To recognize that yes, those things happened. And yes, they shaped you. But they don't have to determine what happens next. I've watched this transformation happen in my own life and in the lives of other cancer placements I know. And what I've noticed is that it doesn't happen through trying to forget or move on or let go. It happens through integration, through acknowledging the full truth of what you experienced, feeling the emotions that are still stored in those memories, and then consciously choosing to create new experiences that generate different kinds of memories. This is why therapy can be so powerful for cancer placements. Particularly somatic therapy or EMDR or any modality that works with stored emotional memory. Because you're not just talking about what happened. You're actually processing the emotional charge that's still attached to those memories. You're completing the emotional cycle that got interrupted. And when you do that, the memory loses its power over you. It becomes just information instead of identity. But you can also do this work on your own, in smaller ways. Every time you catch yourself assuming the worst based on past experience, you can pause and ask yourself, is this actually happening right now? Or am I responding to a memory? Every time you notice yourself pulling back from connection because you're afraid of being hurt, you can acknowledge the fear and then choose to stay present anyway. Every time you start spiraling about what someone might be thinking or feeling, you can recognize that you're trying to control the future to avoid repeating the past, and you can choose to trust instead. These small moments of conscious choice, repeated over time, start to build new neural pathways, new patterns, new memories of times when you chose differently and it worked out, and slowly, your identity starts to shift. You become someone who has experienced pain but isn't defined by it, someone who remembers the past but isn't trapped in it. Someone who can be fully present because you're not constantly referencing what happened before. This is the real healing for cancer's overthinking. Not learning to think less, but learning to be more present. Not shutting down your emotional memory system, but changing your relationship with it. Not trying to become someone you're not, but becoming a fuller, freer version of who you already are. Now I want to address one more thing before we wrap up. And it's about the gift that's hidden in all of this. Because I don't want you to walk away from this thinking that being a cancer placement is just a burden you have to manage. There is genuine power in how your mind works. There is real value in your emotional intelligence and your capacity for deep memory and your sensitivity to relational dynamics. The problem isn't that you have these qualities.